What do you see?
Nice.
That's tomatoes.
Yes.
And what I see opportunity. I see massive post-harvest loss. Nigeria produces the most tomatoes, more than any nation in Africa.
The building of the Lightfire wasn't the biggest challenge. Very quickly it becomes a supply chain challenge.
If you are to set up or be part of a project setting up a tomato cannery in a country like Nigeria, what are the challenges that an entrepreneur, might not be thinking about right now?
This is Solardey, where every story begins with the sun.
Welcome to the Solardey podcast.
Hello, Prosper. Thanks for having me.
It's 25 degrees centigrade right here in Malmö, Sweden, and I guess it's pretty warm where you are as well.
Yeah, we're gonna hit 30, 35 today. Yeah.
That's pretty hot. So most people would be thinking, perfect, let's go to the beach. And you might probably be thinking, let's bake some cookies with Lytefire oven.
Absolutely. I've been also been called a pizzaiolo, and also we do a lot of bread baking, canning, food, anything requiring heat. We're here to do it with Lightfire.
So this is a perfect weather for Lytefire performance.
Actually, it's good. It's good to have hot temperatures, but what we have found, and you being in the Nordics, what we have found is that Lightfire works even in super cold weather. Like, the only thing that matters is direct sunlight. A clear sky. Ideally a dark blue sky that has very little dust, very little evaporation in it. Those days work really well, and those days you can find in winter too. We have been running the Lightfire even in very cold minus temperatures. And there are also entrepreneurs in France using them in really cold temperatures. That doesn't really affect things. The heat around us, the weather doesn't affect it. And for 20 years, we've been trying to work towards changing the energy system and helping people access energy in a different way. And we've been trying to avoid these hot temperatures that make it really hard for anybody to work, not even in solar.
That's fantastic. But before we get into how any of it works, when you look at someone pull out the first tray of bread from Lightfire oven, what do you actually see on their faces? Tell me about
We see
it.
a big smile. We see a big smile, of course, no matter actually whether it's in Africa, the users there, or whether there has been a group of scouts recently that we just posted on social media, building their own Lightfire and then baking cookies, baking bread and all that, pizzas. People are really actually, happy, but also impressed and surprised sometimes, because it's a completely silent but very powerful technology.
As a solar energy installation engineer, my instinct will always be more panels, more batteries, bigger inverter, optimized for home use and sell the excess to the grid, right? That's the world I live in. And you look at the same sunshine and say, forget the batteries. I take the heat. How did it all happen? Because you are a bit of an outlier in our industry.
Absolutely. We're an outlier, both in terms of the scale. Like, we target the artisan users, small scale users, commercial users, but small scale. That already, because there are solar technologies like solar cookers, really small ones, but then you can't do more than a meal at a time. And then there are super large concentrated solar power systems that generate heat and then use steam turbines to make electricity. And we're really in between there and on the lower side, bigger than what you'd use domestically, but smaller than what we would use industrially. And that basically makes us work with artisans. But technologically, we're an outlier too, because we're using mirrors, not photovoltaic panels, and that puts us in a very different reality. This is not kind of a random choice. The reason behind what we're doing is trying to figure out a way in which the energy transition can happen, but it can happen in a way that it does empower, the artisans, the farmers, the small scale entrepreneurs, which are the backbone, of any kind of regenerative future. So if we are imagining a positive scenario in which the human scale and the human connections matter, then I think farmers matter, food production matters, local supply chains matter, sustainability matters, right? And this kind of, in our view, requires a technology that can also be handled, that can be built, that can be maintained, that empowers people. So this we'll talk about it a bit. My background kind of, in our view, requires a technology that can also be handled, that can be built, that can be maintained, that empowers people. So this we'll talk about it a bit. My background, I grew up on a farm, and at 16 years old, I got a scholarship to go to the United World College. One of the, I think it's almost 20 of them worldwide. I went to India for 2 years, also met farmers there. And I got really, introduced to the concept of climate change 19 years ago. And so you combine the poverty, you combine the food system, and you combine the climate change issue, then very quickly energy becomes a really, really important part of the puzzle. If you can't solve it, there's a big problem. And given that background, I often talk about 1/3 and 2/3 world, because the term third world, I don't think it's very appropriate. And what the 2/3 world concept is about is that, keep in mind, that highly developed countries in that perspective, which, let's say, countries with a very sophisticated infrastructure, are making up maybe 1/3 of the world. There's 2/3 of the world, the larger part, with less infrastructure. So when we develop technology and we are, investing our lifetimes in finding solutions and pushing the energy transition forward, what mattered to me and what mattered to our team is, can we focus on something, no matter how, in the end, what is the business model and how it spreads, no matter, how it scales, but can we focus on something that can work also, or especially in places with less infrastructure? Because then it can also cover the other 2/3 of the world. And there we still have a big issue. The solar adoption, right, of photovoltaics. I saw the statistics that our founder Eva posted a few weeks ago. Belgium has a lot of solar, and when you take all the surface area of Belgium's photovoltaic coverage, it's the same amount as all of Africa's 50 plus countries combined. That's incredible. And one of the reasons is that it's not easy to install photovoltaic systems in places where infrastructure is lacking. And for us, it means, is the reason why we're so passionate about developing Lytefire, because it's standalone. You don't need any infrastructure. It's made with mirror that you can get anywhere. You can get it in any larger town in Africa. You can get it in any hardware store in let's say, Europe. It makes it maintainable. It makes it implementable. It makes it not have all those requirements. And in the end, what came also as a big, interesting development is that not only does it work in Africa for African entrepreneurs, bakeries, etc., but we also have lots of artisans in Europe who jump on the same technology, because when you go to the artisans, farmers, different food processing that happens at the small scale, they also often in very simple conditions where they actually think it's an added value to have a standalone solution, to have something that's not connected to the grid, etc. And so we have found that then in the end, there are 3/3 that, that can be interested in our solution.
This is powerful. Something you said earlier when I was going through your journals on Lytefire, you said, and they stuck with me, why are we changing the energy infrastructure if we're going to end up with the same dependencies? Could you unpack that?
Yes, I talk a lot about dependency, right? Because when I studied poverty very quickly, the best, I think, way to understand it is dependency, because nobody chooses to, be in a detrimental situation. And what's happening is dependencies, meaning relationships that are exploitative. This is the thing that keeps manifesting poverty. And if we can break those dependencies, then you can create the conditions where people can leave poverty. But when dependencies and exploitations are constantly reinforced, right, it's an extreme, tough uphill battle for people to get out into a better situation and improve their lives. And when we look at the energy system, on top of the poverty issue, where people who have less money pay a much bigger percentage of their income on energy, right? All the energy prices, that the few cents that it increases because certain politicians on either sides of the big oceans are doing certain things. No matter that, those small energy prices, the ones who feel it the most are the ones who have the least income. And on top of that, we have the mounting conflicts, right? which many of them are because of energy, because certain countries are very thirsty for oil. And both things, the conflicts and the poverty, right? If there was an energy source accessible, available, we would be able to reduce the pressure for global conflicts, and we would be able to reduce the poverty caused by energy. So that's the big thing about dependency, and that's why I see Lytefire as a springboard for positive change. Once a Lytefire is installed somewhere, and we see this with our projects in Africa, when we work with NGOs to start new solar bakeries, for example, every single unit we install creates a chance, creates an infrastructure and an opportunity to bake, to roast, to cook, but without having the constant problem of energy limiting. Because every time you want to do anything, you need energy. Now, when the Lytefire is there, that energy is already there. The more you use it, the more you benefit from it. And you're not constantly constrained by the amount of wood you can collect or the amount of gasoline you can bring in when you have the Lytefire, because the sun is always there.
Now I understand where you're coming from, and I share the same philosophy. Most of the times when we think about innovation, we forget people that actually need it the most, the farmers, the people in the rural area. But what Lytefire does is addressing the fundamental problem. And this is a textbook example that innovation doesn't have to be so complicated. What it needs to do is to solve a problem, to bridge the gap. And that's why I am impressed by the technology. You want more people to be able to build Lytefire ovens, and currently you're running a campaign, crowdfunding campaign. I backed that campaign because I believe in your mission. Although I'm a solar panels installation engineer, I see the other side of solar, because when we talk about solar energy, the first thing that comes to our mind is the electricity. Nobody talks about heat, and sun is already heat. Why do you choose to share that technology with everybody that is interested to know?
Absolutely. Maybe we haven't, picked the easiest way, because we have very strong values and we believe that the energy transition should come from the people, which is going back to what I just said before. If the energy transition comes from a few large corporations producing and shipping internationally, now we shifted the dependence from large multinational oil companies to large multinational photovoltaic companies. I'm not saying that's like not better, like it's much, much better. But when we think about solving poverty, we can see that we may not solve poverty. Investors are super excited about photovoltaic because they can turn them off remotely. So when people default on their payments, boom, they turn off the photovoltaic inverters and people have no energy. And that gives them a certain guarantee, right? But that also is just a kind of an evolution of the dependency scheme, where now you're not dependent on fossil fuels, but you're dependent on photovoltaics, right? If it breaks or something doesn't work, boom, you have no way to repair it yourself. You're not being empowered properly. With Lytefire, we believe that a technology should be maintainable. A technology should be empowering, right? And we're like, this is complete countercurrent. You can see it with anything that's manufactured, phones, etc. Like 4 years of phone, boom, no software updates anymore, no security patches. Throw it away. Throw it away. You can't use it securely anymore. Okay. Cars, everything is just like, it's broken, boom, take out the whole engine, replace it. We're heading in that direction, globally, where things are less and less maintainable, and we're kind of looking at end game capitalism here. Why make something maintainable if I'm literally powerful enough to make people buy the same thing over and over again? So we're definitely not from that corner, because we're not necessarily believing that that's a future that we want to see. So we need to proactively work on a technology that can empower people, that is human scale, that is maintainable. And that's really complicated. Like, it's complicated as a business to do that, right? So how do we do it? And that's also why we're dependent on, and also at the same time empowering, DIY builders, because they are the ones who can bring the technology in so many different pockets in the world, install it for whatever uses they may have. We have super interesting canning business, for example, in France, Fourmi. They are using the Lytefire to cook, for example, big amounts of tomato sauce and different recipes they do. After they can them, so they preserve them, they pasteurize them in nice little glass cans. And they say within 40 kilometers, we deliver this product. And we can even take back the glass cans to wash and recycle them and refill them again for the next season. And that creates a complete sustainable cycle. And what's more is they work with local farmers to basically add value to their produce. That to me is like, that's the future. We have a local network of people who know each other, who are adding value. We're using solar energy. It's sustainable. It's organic. It's high quality. To achieving that is something really amazing. And that's what these entrepreneurs have achieved. And they have built their Lytefire themselves. That's even more amazing. So what we have done is figuring out how to simplify. We have invested in simplifying things. I remember when I started in Nepal, I was doing a project. I was really still working with a previous version of the technology that had glue to hold the mirrors, etc. All of this has been simplified. Today, if you want to replace a mirror, just slide it in, slide the next one down. Everything is modular. You can assemble, disassemble, move it around. You can even change applications. So if you have an oven on, now you can remove it. You can put a cooker on it. And there's really a great potential there to arrive in the near future at a multi-use Lytefire that can do simultaneous baking, roasting, which is a very interesting value-added activity, cooking, canning, and we may be able to expand into more temperature controlled things like distillation, pasteurization, etc., and also tomato paste making. What is tomato paste? It's tomato sauce that's cooked for a long time to evaporate the excess moisture, and you arrive at a paste. Well, if you can do that with solar thermal energy, now you can add value over time without having any energy cost, while at the same time preserving the excess amount of tomatoes, right, or whatever it is that hits when the season is ripe.
Whenever I hear stories like these, especially entrepreneurs that has taken Lytefire and made it their own, and they are using it to solve an existential problem there in France, my mind keep going back to my home country, Nigeria. And it's quite interesting that you talked about tomatoes because I brought something to this show. What do you see?
Nice.
That's tomatoes.
Yes.
And what I see opportunity. I see massive post-harvest loss. Let me tell you something. Nigeria produces the most tomatoes, more than any nation in Africa. But here is what is interesting. 45% of 3.9 million tons of tomatoes produced got rotten before it reaches the consumer. And we are the world's highest importer of tomato paste, over 400 million US dollars annually. So when I first came in contact with Lytefire, as you know, Solardey is actually looking at innovations around the world, focusing on Nordic technology and seeing how we can take it back home and adapt to our local realities. When I saw Lytefire, something sparked in me. I was like, this is an opportunity. If you are to set up or be part of a project setting up a tomato cannery in a country like Nigeria, what are the challenges that an entrepreneur might not be thinking about right now? Could you
Absolutely,
talk me through it?
Yeah. And I can basically quote them because we managed to interview and engage with all these entrepreneurs who are successfully running with Lytefire. And what Fumi said is that the building of the Lytefire wasn't the biggest challenge.
Okay.
So already that we can take away. But and then we have captured a lot of the experience they have, and this is what we're also releasing with the crowdfunding campaign. Because not only do we include the construction guides for people to build their own Lytefires, we're also including an interview series, right? Which is capturing all that experience, what those entrepreneurs have. Because building the Lytefire is not the biggest challenge. And also in Africa, we have several entrepreneurs in Africa that are part of this interview series. They didn't buy the Lytefire. This was funded by the NGO partners we have. And buy the product from us, and we go and we install and we train. And then they're left to figure out all the other challenges. And very often, and now if you talk about tomato in Nigeria, very quickly, the issue is not the fact that you can now with a Lytefire, technically create tomato paste or pasteurized tomato sauce or bake bread or, for example, roast peanuts or something like that and add value to the produce on the farm. That's not the problem. The problem is who's buying the roasted peanuts, or who's boycotting the buying of the roasted peanuts because nobody has seen farmers doing it at high quality. So very quickly it becomes a supply chain challenge. How do you make that money flow back into where the value is added? And we had the similar project in the Amazon as well with indigenous peoples. The idea was there, the same, like, can we roast certain nuts, add value there, and then help them benefit from the fact that the solar shines where they are? Because indigenous communities consume a bit of fuel, they consume some energy, but every time they consume fossil energy, money is needed to pay for that. So they themselves have a trade imbalance with the energy they consume. So if you could do more solar processing, and instead of them selling the sustainably harvested nuts at a very low premium, right, you can get them to add more value to it. Now they get a better margin. Now they can balance their trade deficit, and it helps them stay strong because they are the best stewards we have. And we know the same thing about farmers, about people who are living on the land, who are producing the food globally. Those are small scale farmers. I don't know what the statistic is, and maybe we can add it in here. The statistics on small scale farmers, it's impressive. Like we only see, think about industrial agriculture. Most of the world's food is still produced by small farmers. And when I say still, I think it will continue to be that way, because I think we need people doing that, connected to nature, solving the problems, and the attention level needs to go up. And what I mean by that is farmers need to be able to focus on their land and the specific climate conditions they have. My brother and my father, they're both farmers. I grew up on a farm, and they are exploring alternative crops, things like soya and amaranth and many alternatives because of changing weather patterns, increasing temperature, drought resistance, etc. They're organic farmers, and he's recently published about all the experiments they have done, And I think this is exactly the right direction of what's happening, is that we need to diversify, we need to adapt to the changing climate. And if we can make Lytefire a force to support and create more financial independence, less energy drain, less economic pressure on them, they can do their job better. And hopefully they can get paid more for what they produce. And that reinforces the small scale agricultural system producing the majority of food today. That should also, in my opinion, produce the majority of the food moving forward. The challenges are multiple. Energy is just a small part of it. So back to your question, I think getting the Lytefire, building the Lytefire, or buying the Lytefire, this is one step, part of a much bigger plan. Every time, as you said, solar tomato canning or solar paste production, bread baking. These are very specific businesses and economic activities that in each market, also the quality of the bread, the type of roast, etc., is so different, right? So that's where the challenges are, in the actual general business issues. Then having the Lytefire just gives you that much less energy problems, that much better margin, and that's why we think it needs to spread.
This is definitely decentralization, having farmers through DIY produce their own Lytefire and use it on their farm. And eventually entrepreneurs will start looking at it, and the market segment will definitely grow. Because using Nigeria as a case study again, during the we don't have winter, sorry. During the dry season, that's when we have the surplus of tomatoes. And we have a very high post-harvest loss because of poor infrastructure, the transportation system, the value chain, the cold chain. And during the rainy season, which would have been challenged for Lytefire, we don't necessarily have those surplus. So the ecosystem aligns with the weather, that is required
Totally.
to work with Lytefire. So I think it's an opportunity that I will look into. So if you're an entrepreneur out there in Nigeria, West Africa, listening, Lytefire might be something for you, they currently have a crowdfunding campaign going on. I will put the link to the campaign later. What are the rewards for backing your crowdfunding? And once again, I backed that crowdfunding because I believe Lytefire is the real deal. So could you speak on the rewards?
Yes, two things. One is like we have invested a lot in Africa already, and we are manufacturing in Kenya. Yeah, but most of these products are going into humanitarian projects.
Okay.
Because for us, we are a very small company. So for us, it's very hard to find individual clients. The transactional costs are very high, but the product is there, the manufacturing is there. We're happy with that. Also, when the NGOs come, we can produce at the amounts that they require, etc. All of that is happening well. It's just that we have been struggling because the NGO sector today is asked to do more, right? Mm-hmm. Mounting conflicts, additional humanitarian crisis, climate change, forcing entire populations to move. They are asked to do more, and at the same time, huge budget cuts. This is the reality of the humanitarian sector. We have seen layoffs or work shedding, let's say, of NGOs reducing their European staff, etc., figuring out what kind of austerity measures they can do to keep their operations running, mm-hmm. while they're asked to do more and while there's less finance because of the shutdown of USAID and then ripple effects throughout the humanitarian industry. So anyway, I'm just saying that we've been able to work with the UNDP and get units out into different places successfully. But the industry is, definitely on a downturn, and I hope that something will reboost their capacity because there is more to do, and it's very unfortunate. The other thing is, again, we're manufacturing in Africa, and for the African market, we have a good product, the Lytefire Pro. So any entrepreneurs interested in that, or any people willing to even become retailers, because the in between and the local aspect is still very relevant. You know what I mean? Because Lytefire is so sensitive to the specific business model that you will follow, right? So who is the pioneer? Who is going to figure out how for example, tomato paste production or tomato canning, etc., works in Nigeria? It's not very quickly. It's not about how you get the technology is the same, but very quickly it's about which supermarket can sell this. Can I bring it to a market? Shall I export it to Europe? Like, how do I make it work? Now, very quickly it becomes that kind of issue, and this is what needs to be solved. And I hope we can see much more artisans being able to use the global economy in a way beneficial to them. So this is, I think, the big challenge. How do we not get crushed by it? How do we use it? So that's the big place where innovation is to happen in all different pockets of the world. So for one, Lytefire is there in Africa already. Second, build yourself, low investment costs, more work of your own time, but on the other hand, a process that is actually doable for you with resources that you have already. And that means Lytefire's mirrors you can buy locally, steel you can buy locally. And one thing with the campaign, with the DIY campaign, is that if we reach the next milestone, so now we're at 86%, we're going to reach 100%. But we want to push beyond the 100%, and when we can reach more, then we're going to be able to take some budget that we raised and invest in taking a prototype that I've built in wood and making a construction plan that uses more wood, because wood, again, makes it easier to build, right? And so if you can reduce another barrier, reduce the amount of welding, we can get more people to build easier with material that they're perhaps more familiar with, because a lot of people are more familiar with wood. Anyway, when it comes to the campaign, then we have been pushing, and there's an early bird. There's still 35 of those left, which is a full package, basically everything we have. So I'll just describe the full package, and then if budget is limited or there are other options, just to get the specific thing you need. But the full package includes the construction plans for the oven, the construction plans for the cooker, then the interview series, where we have 6 different entrepreneurs talking about exactly what you were asking, like, how does this specifically work? How much money do you save? What happened? What were the challenges when you started? What is your business model in the end, and what works, and what do you recommend for other people starting up doing the same? So those interviews are going to be really valuable for new people starting up, because again, the building is not necessarily the hard part. The hard part is once you start to make your product, is selling it and planning that well and learning from the lessons that others have already figured out. That's the full package. And then we have, of course, with that comes access to our hub, the platform where people can interact, ask questions, where we are here to help you. We provide support. And, like also the reason why we're pushing hard, I mean, everybody's feeling the climate changes.
Yes.
And we thought the wildfires and the floods would wake people up. That's what we thought after the science was there, 19 years ago when the movie Inconvenient Truth came out. And Al Gore was talking about global warming, what it was called back then. The science was there for a long time. It wasn't enough. Then the wildfires came, the floods came. We thought this would be enough. I think now with the temperature, it's just a matter of time because it's just going to keep increasing. So people will start to want to do something about the energy system and climate change. And so it's an important moment for us as well. And the reason why we are pushing very hard is we're trying to help as many people build a Lytefire this summer, already getting them the construction plans and everything. So we hope that more people can join. We can complete the campaign very soon. And also, I hope we'll be able to go for the additional goals very quickly. And so to help people build this summer, what we'll do is this. We'll complete this campaign. We'll immediately deliver on the perks and the construction plans so people can already start building. Normally, we were going to wait and then improve the guides, but we'll run this in parallel. Mm-hmm. And then those which are planning to build later, okay, they'll just use the improved guide later. But those who are in a hurry and want to build now, they will be able to start right away because the current version of the guide, it's good. But there are a few caveats that will make a list of hints for those who want to start right away. And that way, people who want to start, they can start right away, because again, building a photovoltaic panel, we're talking about a manufacturing capacity. We're talking about a factory that has over air pressure so that no dust comes in and no contamination. We're talking about something that you can't build yourself. And when it comes to Lytefire, that's actually something that you can build yourself or build with friends or work with a local metalsmith, show them the plans, get them to build it for you. So it becomes something that you have a high agency when it comes to your energy needs. And that's why we're pressured and motivated and impatient to get the technology out there because we see the urgency. We see the climate urgency and we see that we have 10 years to make a significant impact on the energy system and on carbon emissions to be able to stabilize eventually the worst aspects of climate. And here I'm talking 30 years from now, but we need to act now.
Yeah, because I was going to ask why now, but you have already touched that as well. And when you were talking about the non-profit and the humanitarian basis and how most of these things are being funded by the non-profits, and then the irony of it all that the non-profits are required to do more while the funding has drastically reduced. My question is this: don't you think it's about time that we start looking into entrepreneurs? Because once you can prove that it's actually economically viable to cook or to bake, to do cannery with Lytefire, people will adapt. People will actually go into it as a business venture. The guys that will construct it, the people that will do the pilot project to create the data that will now help other people to embark on the same journey. For me, I believe in charity, but I have always believed that for an impact to be consistent, for an impact to last, it has to be somewhat profitable. So do you have a case study?
Absolutely, yeah.
The numbers, I think, is equally important because once we can prove that, of course, when you even talk about photovoltaic, some people might claim that they are installing solar panels because of the climate change or whatever. But me being in the industry, I know that the first reason why most people install solar panels is to save money or make money.
Absolutely.
Can we think like that in Lytefire?
Absolutely. And this is exactly our thinking as well. And why we've been focusing on entrepreneur users, right? All the work we do in Africa is focusing about, starting new businesses, starting new bakeries, starting new, roasting and cooking operations that either weren't possible before or were happening before, but they were happening using charcoal for baking, or they were happening using firewood for cooking, right? And we can replace that, and that means energy savings, right? And the same thing in Europe with canning. We have some case studies. We also have a calculator, a savings calculator. And what we know is that if you're going to do like one meal a day or something like that on Livefire, it's not going to be interesting. And that's still really cool from a like independence and autonomy point of view. Like you have a Livefire when you need and want, or when electricity is out or something like that. And, we have had power outages in Europe because of heat, right? We're completely unprepared. So that's also why the title of our crowdfunding campaign is Prepare for the Future, right? You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how much more the electricity grid can take. I'm not talking about more data centers consuming more energy. I'm talking about climatization. And I'm talking about just grid overload because of the heat. So prepare for the future, I think is an important thing to do. But what you were saying is that already today, those who are using it to power a business, those are the ones accumulating the savings. And for example, the canning business, they're not canning every day, right? They are also, it's a seasonal activity, right?
Yes.
But still, per year, they save 800 to 1,000 euros in gas. And they don't even have a high utilization of the Livefire. Now, when you talk about baking, bakeries, they are producing on a more regular cycle. Now their savings are going to be higher, right? And then what's interesting about roasting is that what we've seen is that the roasting businesses that roast seeds, etc., like Michel Mouillet and different ones in France as well, they're able to do 100% solar. They're not even going to have to fall back on an alternative energy source for a rainy day, because they're just going to say, hey, my roasted peanuts, my raw seeds, I can just store them and I can just process them when I have sun. Then they're even further, expanding on their energy savings. And it's the same thing what you said with Nigeria and the seasonality of the tomato harvest, right? And that being the dry season, you're going to have a high utilization of the Livefire over several weeks, and that's what creates the savings. So that's really context specific. What are the savings? But basically, take the energy that you would normally spend. And in many cases, people just don't do the business because they don't want to spend that energy. Replace it with a Livefire, you don't have that energy cost. In fact, there's one baker in France who we interviewed, and we asked, what are your energy savings? And he said, this is a French baker, he said, I didn't make any calculations because I don't have any energy costs. He was like, I don't understand your question. Why would I care about that? I have a Livefire, I don't have any costs. So he hasn't even quantified the energy savings. And others have, like Furmi, and also for the bakeries, etc. In Kenya, we have case studies. So anybody interested in that, also, we are happy to share documents, because then, if you're in Africa, maybe those case studies are more relevant.
Yeah.
But it's really the Livefire only brings value when you use it. In terms of preparedness, having Livefires around is good, because when you're going to start using it more and more, you're going to benefit more and more. And already, if energy is a big part of your expenditure, especially thermal, above 100 degrees Celsius, baking, roasting, cooking, I think it makes sense today. There's another thing now that we are starting to feel, is that there's an interesting market with small bakers,
Okay.
and also these entrepreneurs who may not want to build their own Livefire, but they're willing to invest and buy a product. So we're also constantly thinking about what we can do to optimize the Livefire, make it easier, speed up the adoption. As you said, like an entrepreneur, they just want to buy and save money from day one. So we're thinking about what we can do in terms of that, in terms of scaling and making the adoption easier with the product as well. But this requires investments. This requires a whole R&D cycle to adapt and improve certain aspects. But we're here to figure out whatever needs to be done. Whatever needs to be done to spread this technology, we're game. So anybody interested in investing in that, working with us on that, piloting and etc. Like, we're really excited about all of that. And again, the possibilities today are very simple. If you're in Africa, we can ship. If you are in Europe, we can help you build. And in between, there are so many other options. So basically, inviting everybody to check out the campaign we have. It also has a really interesting video summarizing a bit the last 14 years of work we have done, so people get really understand also some technical aspects, as well as the history and the values we have, which I think also matter.
I really like the fact that you can actually ship out the product you build yourself and you manufacture in Africa, in the
Yes.
continent, and you can ship
Yes.
from there. And also you can empower anybody that want to build it themselves.
Yes.
I love those ideas and I would definitely look into it. And I believe that most of my listeners also are people that think the way I do, the vision aligned here, and we will explore opportunities in West Africa to be specific. It's been really nice having this conversation with you. This is a learning moment for me because I didn't know much about the thermal technology, solar
Yes.
oven. Have not seen anyone actually using it or building it. And for the fact that you have taken it as a live mission is incredible. I want to commend you for what you're doing. Again, I see a situation where photovoltaic can actually collaborate with Lytefire. For
Absolutely.
instance, when you take in like tomato fresh, that you have a cooling system where you can keep the tomatoes under a required specific temperature that is suitable for preservation until you use light fire to cook them and pasteurize it. So I
Absolutely.
see like a synergy between.
When we get into the specifics of that, I was just thinking that if you harvest the tomatoes a bit earlier, they are more acidic, of course, which you would need to balance out by adding a bit of sugar later on, but they will probably store better. An overripe tomato needs cooling, but a little bit underripe tomato, it will store better just in the dark, basically. So we can also try to eliminate cooling. We start to redo what our ancestors were doing, right? Fermentation, working with the day cycle, yeast. There's so many like artisanal manufacturing techniques very much focused on reducing the amount of energy, improving storage life, etc. So there's definitely already something like pre-harvest that can be done about prolonging and reducing the amount of cooling that you need. Then I was thinking that we should talk about it because photovoltaics are very complementary to Lytefire because photovoltaics are great for phones, right? For digital, for lighting, for mechanics to run the mixer, etc. But then they're horrible for powering, cooking. I'm saying horrible is not the right word, and also it's not about efficiency. It's just the reality. Like a Lytefire provides 3.5 kilowatts of thermal energy. And with 3.5 kilowatts of thermal energy, you can bake, you can roast, you can cook. You can, for example, if you look at an electric stove, a normal electric stove, like not an induction one, they heat the pot with, let's say, 3.5 kilowatts, right? With the same 3.5 kilowatts, you could be charging 300 phones, be charging 50 laptops. You could be running you could be running, let's say, 35 TVs, or you could be cooking one tea kettle for the time it takes to heat the water. Now, I'm just saying that photovoltaic is really good at certain things and some high value things that you can't do with a Lytefire, like connectivity, digital stuff. I think electricity is really amazing, but then when it comes to heating stuff, you need a lot of current, you need a lot of watts, and Lytefire is really efficient at getting those watts. And so that's where we think this the complementary thing, where photovoltaics are great, and you can actually minimize the amount of photovoltaics you need by having a Lytefire, because now you're not going to draw from the grid or from the photovoltaic system all that current just to do the heating. So again, I think there is a complementariness there between photovoltaics and Lytefire. And Lytefire is really outperforming on anything that requires heat.
I thought there was a conflict before, but now we are friends, actually.
Yes, exactly.
It's about deploying the right energy source for the right purpose.
It's the same always. We can have a conflict if you want, right? Said we can also work together, and then everybody's better off. So
yeah. I like that angle. It actually explained what I was thinking before, and you're right. It's very complementary, and
yes,
the user cases you
in the end, like it always comes down to cost efficiency, right? Like efficiency by itself doesn't do much. Like for example, we're more efficient than photovoltaics, but what does that mean? Like for example, photovoltaics 20% efficient. Okay, so Lytefire can be like 70% efficient. Okay, it means that we can do the 3.5 kilowatts with 5 square meters of mirror, whereas we would need to use 17 square meters of mirror of photovoltaics. What does that mean? It doesn't really matter. What matters is how much you pay for those photovoltaics, how much you pay for those 17 square meters of photovoltaics, how much do you pay for 5 square meters of mirror, right? And then you move from efficiency to cost efficiency. And that's, I think, the perspective that matters. Yeah. And then again, the more you use the Lytefire, then the more is the benefit. And that's very different with photovoltaics, where you just install it and it will just deliver over time value, whenever there's sun into the grid. But the Lytefire is not in the grid, so use it. And that's why entrepreneurship is the key, because the entrepreneurs, they get the hours in to really make a commercial success.
It's for someone that adopted Lytefire now, what would it be like with the innovations that you're still working on 10 years from now?
Thank you. So 10 years from now, I think we will have reached a really interesting sweet spot between maintainability, which is, I stress it, it's absolutely key to put humans into empowerment, right? Maintainability, and adding, automation, adding temperature control, adding remote control, so that we can just say, hey, boom, the sun is out, boom, the Lytefire starts preheating. Okay, you want to bake today? Great, we'll get it to 220 degrees. So when you put in the bread, the temperature dips just to the right amount. Okay, we can have some water injection to improve the bread crust. You can plan with the Lytefire as well. So the weather forecast is taken into consideration, and it recommends you, hey, this is how you can structure your week to get the work done, with the sun, to optimize, how much, to maximize the amount of work you can do with the Lytefire. So there's all this work to be done around the automation, the usability, the multifunctionality of the Lytefire. So one unit that can do the baking and the cooking and the roasting and the pasteurizing and the distilling and the evaporating in one. Because what we will know is that we need to shift from a perspective of optimizing a linear flow. So optimizing from tomato production to tomato storage to tomato processing to tomato evaporating to packaging to selling, a linear flow supply chain, to a resilient supply chain, which means I have a tomato, I can dehydrate it, I can pasteurize it, I can evaporate it, I can consume it right now, I can sell it locally. People will need necessarily, because of the changes that are coming to the food system by force, right? Our hand is forced. Climate change is forcing our hand. The changes that are coming by force, we need to be able to respond to that. So in 10 years, the Lytefire must be a multi-use, resilient building technology that is already doing today, but that's the direction, I think, in which the innovation needs to go. And I think that many companies and industries are heading into a direction of just linearly optimizing. We need to focus on resilience, and we need to focus on stability that it brings, and empowering farmers, and that requires enabling people to do things, enabling people to tap into the sun and do the maximum with it.
When we talk about resilience, especially here in Sweden and the Nordics, the government has a lot of incentives for farmers to install solar panels with a battery storage on their farm. I think Lytefire has a place in that resilience structure, actually.
Yes.
It could be a thing in Europe and the Nordics that instead of focusing only on batteries and photovoltaic, that Lytefire could have a space in that where farmers can actually process their product, and also in case of no electricity at all, that we are guaranteed that we have food regardless
100%.
of season. So I think this is applicable everywhere there is sunlight. Before we leave, their final words.
Isn't that the message of Solardey?
It is. The solar
Tell me again. It's made out of Nigerian, right? But I haven't heard you speaking a single sentence of Nigerian. So, what does Solardey mean?
Okay, Solardey basically means it's a word play where solar, the sun, and then day in Nigerian Pidgin English means available. It's here. So when you bring solar, the sun, and you put it with day, it simply means the sun is here. I normally ask people, why do we burn things for energy when the sun is literally here?
Yes, absolutely.
That's why Lytefire
Beautiful.
speaks to me, because most of the time when I talk about Solardey, I focus on solar energy in form of electricity, not thermal energy. So this is a kind of eye-opening to think about solar in its purest form.
No, I mean, you're speaking to the choir when you say that Lytefire has a future in agriculture, in Europe, in Africa, because electricity is not everything, right? And the other thing you were saying, like, this is a different approach. We are at a disadvantage, as we're a super small company. We've been on it for 14 years. So that's why we need to make it a community effort. That's why we need to collaborate. And we know that really it's the entrepreneurs and the DIYers, the pioneers, right, who are doing the real hard work of making that thing real. Because the disadvantages that we have is that electricity was pushed because it requires the least change in the system. So the difficulty we have is that Lytefire requires a few more changes in the system, but those changes are positive ones, right? Those are the changes we should fight for. And so we have to, as a small company, fight also against the couple of decades that were lost by not investing in solar thermal, by not, we are sometimes, there's no option in the drop down. Like when we apply for funding, very often, we can't even select our own technology type. We're not in the mainstream in that sense. We're a niche innovation, and it's because historically the train tracks were switched to photovoltaics. But again, being smart, having a different approach, figuring out, how we can do this by collaborating with other people, by working with other people, by empowering DIYers, by putting Africa first also, we're not choosing the easy way, right?
I understand.
But I think we need to continue on this direction because this is the direction that brings the change that we need to have.
I think you must have a lot of passion, because when it gets difficult, it's your passion that carries you through. And that passion I can see is that eagerness to make a change, to impact. And that's a beautiful thing to see. You focus on delivering impact to the most vulnerable people directly. It's a noble cause, and I am really happy that somehow I am part of it now. Just from backing it and now looking at it as a possibility, I would see how we can use our platform and connections I have back home, the African diaspora, because most cases we see these technologies first and then we bring it home. So this will be communicated and we will be getting back to you and see what we can do from here moving forward.
Thank you so much for the work you do. I mean, this exchange has been extremely heartwarming and interesting. It's super cool to bring these different perspectives together.
Yes.
And be curious about what needs to be done and figure out ways we can work together. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So before we go, we normally ask people who they want to see next on our show. Would you recommend anyone doing something cool? Maybe people using Lytefire or any other technology?
Absolutely. I will, straight from the top of my mind, of course, I have to recommend Eva Wissens. She has been the founder of Lytefire and even has a long backstory, also working with solar thermal, and she brings a different perspective to the team, and it is thanks to her farsight, her strategical work also that we are here today. Because as mentioned, it's not easy as a small company even just to survive, let alone to keep innovating, let alone to do work on different continents at the same time. So she has been bringing that whole backbone and heart and humanitarian values as well to the team and reinforce that. And so it's been really amazing working with her. And then as well others from the team, each one bringing different skills, etc. there. Also the entrepreneurs, I mean, those could be interesting cases as well to interview, understand more how they're doing. So that's something that we should also think about. Absolutely. Yeah. This is what we're doing with the campaign also. Put them forward, let them speak, let them explain, because they're the ones who do it on the daily. They're the ones who really, when we have a vision and a strategy and a plan and we do our hard work, that's fine. But in the end, it's them, right? Taking it to wherever they are, doing what they do. And that is the impact.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. We will definitely, through you, reach out to Eva and see when she can come up here and have more conversation with us. I think people need to hear more about these projects.
Yes. There is also Joanne from the Solarfire bakery in Kenya, an African entrepreneur.
Yes, I saw the YouTube.
Yeah, there's also Prudence Benedict and their team in Uganda. There's a bunch of really cool entrepreneurs that haven't gotten visibility. Like for Joanne, trying to get her into media, etc., it's really hard. It's much easier to run a European story. So any visibility we can get to African entrepreneurs also, it's really important. It's really important because not only is it important to just balance the inequality that exists, but also like what is happening in Africa today can be very relevant.
Exactly.
That learning, that experience. So that can be interesting for European listeners too. Know how to adapt and work with the climate in a completely different setting. For now, it's very different. I don't think it's going to be much different much longer.
I completely agree with you because we can borrow from each other's experience and then refine and adapt to our current reality. Whether you're in Africa or you're in North America or you're in Europe, the story is the same. We are all connected with the climate change. We have challenges, and then collectively we can actually borrow from each other and solve problems one at a time. So I am very excited also about speaking with Johan and other entrepreneurs that are already using Lytefire in the continent, in Africa. I will be happy to have a conversation with them. It will be very impactful.
Thanks so much.
It's been really nice
Thanks for
talking
making
with
time.
you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time. And you listeners out there, stay bold, keep shining, peace and solar power to the people. Thank you.
Solardey. Thank you.
This is Solardey, where every story begins with the sun.